So I was positively giddy when I walked into Whole Foods and saw they had persimmon. That means they are in season, that fall is coming. I'm so happy. But of course, persimmon comes with a lot of food puns, right? Because persimmon sounds like permission. And so I'd love to hear some of your best food puns. Leave them down in the comment section below. Because of course, fruit like this is ripe for comedy. What's shaking, bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography. So if you're into that, you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And today is a part 2 continuation of last week's discussion about artificial light. Now, last week we went through what are all the different types of artificial lights. And so this week what I want to do is show you that no matter what light you're using, whether that's continuous or flash, there are 3 basic things that I always keep in mind as it relates to manipulating artificial light to get the kind of look and feel that I'm going for in my food photography. So if you want to know what the 3 things are that I always keep in mind when working with artificial light, then you stick around. So numero uno, I always keep in mind, what am I using to diffuse my light? Because we have talked about diffusion in plenty of prior videos. I've got a video actually dedicated completely to that topic in relationship to natural light, linked right up over here so you can go grab that. But the same rules apply both for natural light as well as artificial, the idea that we have our primary light source, and if in the event that that primary light source is casting very direct, intense rays on our scene that are causing maybe hard light, when we want softer, more diffused light, then we want to incorporate a diffuser. Because with a diffuser, our direct light source is passing through that layer of diffusion material, and instead of continuing on as straight direct rays, they're then being kind of dispersed and sent off into multiple directions, and they're diffused, creating softer, more even light. So for artificial light, we can of course use the diffusers that we use for our natural light shooting as well. Just stick those between your subject matter and the light. It'll diffuse that light. Or we can incorporate things like our soft boxes, which we talked about last week. But one other like bonus vocab word as it relates to soft boxes and diffusion material is a baffle. So look at like this soft box that I have here that I like to shoot with this square. Well, it not only has the diffusion material here on the front of it, but if you look inside, there is a second layer of diffusion material called a baffle. And this is particular to the construction of different types of soft boxes depending on how they work. But the way that this one is constructed, it helps to have that second layer because the way that the light is directing and the depth of that soft box. So the light coming from that source then comes through the baffle, then comes through the second layer of diffusion material, so it is nice and soft and even. So by no means are you doing it wrong if all of a sudden you're like, you know, what if I add a second layer of diffusion? I definitely have done this before with different soft boxes, with different setups, that it's just still reading a little bit too hard in terms of the way that that light looks. And so adding a second layer of diffusion sometimes is what you need. Sometimes all you need is one though. But one thing just to keep in mind is how thick is that layer of diffusion material. That also contributes to how much is that light being dispersed. The thicker it is, the more soft it will be. But of course, you can also get too thick of diffusion material that the light isn't penetrating at all. So that's why I love the various diffusers that I use here in the studio. I've got those all linked down below. Numero dos, I always keep in mind what is the size of my light source relative to my subject matter or to my scene. The idea that a larger light source is going to make smaller, softer shadows, and the idea that a smaller light source is going to give you more intense, harder shadows. Just like a couple weeks ago when we did the video in the restaurant, I've got that linked up over here, all about shooting at dinner time. And just as like a little follow-up to that, I got a lot of guff about like, don't do that at a fancy restaurant. Well, of course, use your common sense. Don't do that at a fancy restaurant. But if you're at a media dinner because you're a blogger and you need something to create some light, anyway, I'm not gonna get into it. You guys know what I'm talking about. So when it comes to food, I always say that bigger is better. But of course, food is small, so it doesn't mean that we need giant light sources. And two, keep in mind that our diffuser becomes our light source in this situation. That we of course have our primary light source, but as soon as it hits that diffusion material, that then becomes our light source. That's why you can have a small light like a speed light, but the second it hits that larger diffusion material, like this 47-inch round softbox that I like to shoot with, that all of a sudden it is now dispersed at that 47-inch size, making really nice small soft shadows on our food. So people will frequently ask, well then what's like the perfect size of a softbox or a diffuser that I need for food photography? Well, you know, I have a giant freaking diffuser, which let me tell you, that is a beast to fold up. But you can get away with shooting with something that's not gigantic. It depends on what you're shooting. For me, the smallest softbox, the smallest diffuser size that I own is 35 inches. And that seems to cover a great wide variety. Now, if I really want to like take it bigger, like I'm shooting a cake or something, then I take it up to my 47-inch, or I have my big giant behemoth diffuser that I believe is 80 inches. It's huge. It was ridiculous. When that thing showed up at the house, I didn't mean to buy it, but now I use it all the time. So you've got your diffusion and then you've got your size, but then there is one more thing that really makes a huge difference, and to me is the one place where people really go wrong when incorporating artificial lights, is to really think about then the proximity of the light to your scene. That the closer the light source is to your food, to your subjects, to whatever you're trying to light, the smaller the shadows will be, right? Closer, smaller. Further away, longer. And that makes sense. Like, just take some time. Next time you've got a setup going on, and whether you're using natural light or you're using an artificial light, just move the subject closer and further away from the light, and you'll see how those shadows get longer and shorter. So when I'm really going for very small shadows, I'm gonna get that light right up next to my food, like literally just outside the frame. But then also keep in mind then the proximity of the light to the diffusion material, because the closer that light source is to that diffusion material, the harder the shadows are going to be, whereas the further that's going to be away, the softer those shadows are going to be. But now keep in mind that the further that the light gets away from the diffusion material, that the darker it's going to make your scene, because proximity of the light source definitely impacts the exposure, that it's going to be brighter when it's closer, darker when it's further. So you're going to have to change your settings depending on where that light is coming from. But now this is reminding me that maybe you have a softbox, and so you're saying, well, Joni, my light is in a fixed position and that my diffusion material, like I can't make the light closer or further away from that. The softbox is the way the softbox is, and absolutely 100%. And for the most part, softboxes are all engineered understanding that that principle is in play, that the light has to be at a certain distance in order to get the proper spread through that diffusion material. So never fear, don't try to take apart your softbox or try to jerry-rig it. It's the way it's supposed to be. But if you're not liking the way that the light looks coming out of that particular softbox, well then just rely on the other things that we've talked about, you know, considering your proximity to the food, or how big is that light source relative to the kind of food that you're shooting, or do we need to add some additional diffusion material? So you can see with these three different concepts in play, the idea of diffusion, the size of our light, and the proximity of our light, why when I'm setting up a scene and I'm going for smaller, softer shadows and even lighting, why I'm going for a large softbox or a large diffuser, I'm diffusing that primary light source as well as putting it right next up to the scene. That's how I'm going to achieve that kind of look. But of course, that's also sort of the fun of it too, right? Depending on what you're going for, depending on the kind of lighting you're trying to create, that vibe, that mood, you can manipulate any one of these, change those up, and have a significant impact on your scene. So hopefully if you are just delving into the world of artificial light, or you've been using artificial light and you've been frustrated by it, try out adding some diffusion to the situation, or try moving that light closer, or you just need a larger diffuser or larger softbox. But hopefully this gives you some ideas. Hopefully this answered some questions you had. Certainly if you have additional questions, you've got the comment section below. I'll keep an eyeball on that. But with that, I hope you have a fabulous day. I hope you stay out of trouble, and I'll see you again here real soon, okay? Bye!